So welcome everyone to the February meeting of the Australian Zonta Says Now think tank. My name is Carol Theobald and I'm speaking to you today from the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people in Western Australia. I will be hosting today's meeting with the help of Bernadine Guy from New South Wales and Petra Ladwig and Sandra McLean in Queensland. Bernadine is the District Governor for District 24, that includes New South Wales and ACT, and Petra is the District Governor for the District 22, that covers Queensland. So thank you everyone for joining today's meeting, and as you can see, the theme of the meeting is Facing Up to Disaster. This is our programme for today, and I know we've got quite a few guests here, and you're welcome to stay for as long as you like. There's no secrets. Before we begin, I'd like to cover some housekeeping. Please say hi in the chat and tell us from where you're calling from today. Please use the chat line to make comments. Keep your microphone on mute. Ask short, succinct questions and use welcoming and inclusive language. The recording of this meeting will be uploaded to our website, but the discussions in the breakout rooms are not included in the final recording. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Bernadine for our welcome. Over to you, Bernie.
Thank you. First, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in all the places we meet from today and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Please put where you are joining from today in the chat line. At each meeting, we like to put the spotlight on a First Nations woman who is making a difference in the community. Today, we honour Barbara Abui, a proud Zenarkez woman from Sabai Island in the Torres Strait Islands. The highest point is just 1.7 metres above sea level. The sea is rising at twice the global average. Homes flood, burial grounds and sacred sites are at risk. The islanders are on a dangerous course to being Australia's first permanent climate refugees. Barbara founded climate collective Zenarkez so Torres Strait Islanders can lead their own climate response on country, in courtrooms and on the world stage. She stands with elders Uncle Pabai and Uncle Paul Kabai in their landmark case against the Australian government, arguing it failed to protect their islands, culture and future generations from climate change. Although the federal court dismissed the claim in 2025, the appeal continues. Barbara also produced the feature documentary Testimony, soon to be launched globally, bringing this historic fight for climate justice to the world. She says, we are facing complete displacement from our traditional inheritance and identify in the next couple of decades. Barbara is fighting for the very existence of her home and culture. We wish Barbara well and hope to meet her in the future. Climate change is happening here, right now, and in Australia. The extreme weather Carol experienced during 10 days in January prompted her to submit some artwork to our Zonta Says Now virtual art gallery. She experienced smoke from a major bushfire in Perth that set her coughing, then flew to Sydney to see her daughter, where she experienced flash flooding and power cuts in Sydney. And a few days later, she returned to Perth and 40+ heat and a dead garden. She felt that nature was fighting back and so captured her feelings in this collection of photos. You can share your experiences in the Zonta Says Now virtualartgallery.org. Enter now and your art can feature in the 2026 collection that will be launched on Earth Day. So back to our topic. How has your year started? We'll do a quick poll on what you have experienced so far this year. Have you experienced extreme heat, bushfire or smoke, floods, severe storms, sorry.
Okay.
looks like extreme heat has been experienced by the majority, followed by bushfires.
Yeah. Over to you, Bernie.
Our second poll asks how ready you were for these events. Do you have a bushfire plan, disaster preparedness plan, emergency warning app on your phone, extreme heat plan?
I think we're mostly there. I'll end the poll and share the results. Can you see the results?
Yep.
Good. You want to comment on them, Bernie?
My comments are, looks like very close to the line for a few of them. Emergency warning is on 9 people's apps. We have a bushfire plan and then extreme heat plan, the top 3. Not far behind are the others, though, only 1 or 2.
And 22% have nothing. So that's interesting to note. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Interesting to know.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you. I'll hand over to Petra to introduce you to our guest speaker.
Thank you, Bernadette. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Margaret Moreton, who is the CEO of Gender and Disaster Australia. Margaret has an extensive career spanning 40 years, including social policy, advisory roles, program management, and the provision of consultancy services. Dr. Moreton undertook original research at the Australian National University, highlighting community lived experience of disaster resilience following fire, flood, and cyclone. More recently, she has led the Australasian Institute for Disaster Resilience and was mission lead for Community Resilience Mission as part of the then Minderoo Foundation Fire and Flood Resilience Initiative. She is a passionate advocate for inclusive and collaborative approaches to building resilience to disasters and strongly believes we must take a systemic approach to face the challenge of increasingly intense and frequent disasters. If you have any questions for Margaret, please put them in the chat, and after her talk we will have a discussion that may prompt more questions. Over to you, Margaret.
Thank you, Petra, for that intro. It's lovely to be here, and I will just take 1 sec to share my screen. And while I do that, I'd like to let you know that if you do have any questions along the way, or if you'd like me to cover anything toward the end, please ask me anything you like. I'm completely open to any kind of questioning. I found the polls really interesting. I was in, a couple of years ago now, I was in a completely emergency management focused conference with hundreds of delegates. Someone on the stage asked a very similar question, raise your hand if you have an emergency plan. About 20% of the people raised their hands, and it really set the scene. So even people who do this work have this bias where it won't happen to me, it'll be fine. So very, very interesting. So what I'll do is I have prepared a slide deck. I'll scoot through it, and then if there's anything you want me to go back to, or if anything you want to ask, as I say, don't hesitate. So before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that I'm not on the lands where I usually live or work. I'm visiting family for the weekend. So I'm on Bunurong, Boonwurrung, Wurundjeri and Wurrung land at the meeting place of many groups of the Kulin Nation. I'm in southern Naarm, which is Melbourne, and yeah, I pay my deep respects. I'll come back to that in just a moment. Let me see if I can forward my slide deck. Yes. So we have quite a long written acknowledgement that's in a lot of our written materials at Gender and Disaster Australia. So I would like to acknowledge elders past, present and young people emerging in the Indigenous communities in all of the lands that we're all coming from. I can see from the chat that many of you are all over this country of ours. So I pay my respects and express my gratitude for the patience and generosity of Indigenous people in relation to all of the dreadful practices, really, that my forebears have certainly been a part of. And I'm constantly grateful that they are kind and tolerant towards us as far as they are. I thought I would introduce myself properly first. So here are some photographs. The bottom left photograph is the farm on which I grew up in Western Victoria, and it's one of my favourite places, and that's clearly in springtime. But the two people that are featured on this slide most prominently are my parents. You can see that I am not a young person. So what a fabulous car my parents had. I don't remember that car, but nevertheless, I'm the cutie pie sitting on the front bonnet next to my brother. And I now say, but I didn't in my childhood, I now say I am the daughter of two farmers. One happens to be a woman and one happens to be a man, but they both worked that property. It's worth explaining the photograph on the right. We had a fire when I was a teenager. I didn't know I'd end up in this kind of work, but we had a fire when I was a teenager, and a familiar phrase in fire emergency is, and then the wind changed. The wind changed and the fire went away from our property. Could have easily come toward our property. It was headed to us. Went away from our property and our community was devastated. This is in the 70s. And that photograph of my father was taken by a photographer from what was then called the Stock and Land, a newspaper. And he was feeding our hay from our home to the sheep of neighbours. He was actually a little way away from home, so there weren't people who knew him well. And there's a good reason that's in black and white, partly the age of the photograph, and also that hideous hat on the top of my father's head is bright orange. The children, we were all deeply embarrassed every time he wore it. And the photographer said, you know, mate, what's your name? I want to put you in the Stock and Land. And as a kid, I was 12 at the time, I wrote away and got a copy of this photograph and the article. I was so impressed by his answer. He basically said, this is almost a direct quote, mate, my name doesn't matter. Look around you. We're a community and we're helping each other because together we'll step back up. Now, they didn't actually print his name. They printed that. And I was never so proud of him for just not making it about him. So that tells you a little bit about the values that I grew up with, and I'm sure many of those of you online grew up with. Fast forward a little, I went away to boarding school. I went to university, I got a job, I got married, I had children, I got divorced. They're all long stories. And in the midst of all of that, I worked for government. And one of the things in Canberra, federal government, one of the things that used to worry me is that we'd make policies and nobody in the room would be directly affected by the policy. And I kept asking, where are the people who are most affected by what we're discussing? And they were never invited into the conversations. Now, we're getting a little bit better than that at the moment. 2009 was a dreadful year. Black Saturday fires burned across Victoria. 173 people died. And so I took leave and then resigned because they wouldn't allow me to take leave for long in order to do a PhD. And I wanted to explore a version of what my father said. What is it that communities most affected by fires, floods, and cyclones look back on as the reason they're able to recover afterwards? So that was the nature of my PhD. And I'm an advocate for funding, continue to advocate for funding, but no one said money. Not a single person in the 140 people I interviewed said money. They all said neighbours, friends, strangers sometimes, compassion, humanity. That's what helps us to stand back up. So, having met those 140-ish people, I never went back to the public sector and I served the public in a new way in the area of disaster. So, as Petra described, I've been part of the Minderoo Foundation. I've led the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience, and this crew are the crew I now lead. This is how small Gender and Disaster Australia is. In addition to these, and you'll notice we're all female. We have a couple of who would say they're non-binary, but we're basically women and non-binary. We have no men. We do have walking alongside us about 45 active trainers. I'll talk about our training in a moment, and many of those are men. But this is my crew, and I couldn't do the work that I do without them. They're a fabulous team of people. I thought you'd just like to see what we look like. So who are we and what do we do and why do we do it? That's what I'm going to tell you. So we work at this intersection of gender and disaster, where we conduct research. We've developed a training program that we roll out for free. Any of you and any people you know, if you're interested, information's on our website. I've popped a link to the website in the chat for all of you who, some of us like to do three things at once. If anyone wants to be on the website having a look on another screen, go for broke. And we offer this training program in understanding what is this. I don't understand, Margaret. What's this gender and disaster? Common question. We also develop resources that are useful. There are checklists and data sheets and all sorts of things that will be helpful. And a new one since I've joined the crew is we're trying to strengthen the partnerships we have. Thank you for your invitation, Carol. It's lovely to be here. Strengthen our partnerships to improve this inclusion and reduce harm. Now, the reduce harm bit I'll come back to in a moment. There are a few things that motivate us. Why do we do this work? Often people will say, why are you doing this work, Margaret? So, strong evidence base, both in Australia and internationally, indicates that women are at increased risk of domestic and intimate partner violence. It varies from study to study, but usually about 4 to 5 times more likely to experience domestic and intimate partner violence after a disaster. People who were experiencing it beforehand, the research shows that it increases in, what's the right word? It gets worse. It gets worse. Families, communities, and couples who've never had violence before experience violence on the increase. There are many reasons for that. People lose homes, livelihoods, and the stresses and strains contribute. Now, we say in our training program that is never an excuse, but the stresses and strains contribute to this increase in violence. Not to mention the fact that alcohol use goes up as well. We have stats on that from alcohol sales in disaster-affected communities. So there's a lot of reasons why we as a team absolutely want to address that increased risk. We would like to keep women safe. Children, of course, are affected by all of that because families that have children, the children hear, see everything that happens, even little ones that you don't think are paying attention. I'm sure many of you would agree with this. Children absorb what's in the environment around them. And so the difficulties that face children go up as well. Now, the interesting thing about men, my friends think I'm hilarious. So men is one of my favourite topics at the minute because they do, in fact, demonstrate greater aggression and violence towards others. So men are sometimes victims of increased violence as well, but far less than the women in our communities. So the idea of what does a man look like and what does a man do and how does he respond to stress, these are issues that we are now turning our attention to. However, as well as perpetrating this violence, men are affected in other ways. And whenever I go to this motivation, I go back to some of the men I interviewed in my own research all those years ago. Men are often crushed and devastated by what's happened and what they've seen, and their own sense of frustration that they haven't been able to protect their home, protect their children and their partner. One farmer, as you know, I'm the daughter of farmers now, one farmer said to me, and he actually began to cry, and this was 4 years after the crisis had affected his home. He said, I thought and I have goosebumps right now because I can still hear and see him. I thought I'd lost the family farm on my watch. My father didn't lose it. My grandfather didn't lose it. My great-grandfather didn't lose it. And taking away the gender reactions I have to what I'm about to say, I have two sons, and I was about to lose the farm, and they would never inherit. And for him, that was just devastating. And he cried for the first time with me 4 years after the most frightening night of his life. Long story about that man, but he stays with me. So the idea of what a man is supposed to do affects men in their own trauma. Add to that the next point, which is the stigma about getting help. Now, you could argue this is a stereotype, and I talk in the language of stereotypes for men and women. Most of us would reach out to a friend, a sister, a girlfriend, someone we trust, and talk about whatever's happened in our lives that has been distressing. Most men don't know how to do that. And so sometimes they talk to a random grey hair. Boy, my grey hair was, I had it then, I went grey early, was very handy for some of these men. They would never see me again. They knew I would leave the community, and they were able to confide in me in ways they couldn't to their own networks. And the final point I've got up there is LGBTIQA plus people. We have lots of examples emerging now of exclusion and lack of safety. We have examples where people have been harassed, physical violence, simple things like wanting to go to the toilet at the relief centre and having someone say, "Get out of our toilet, you're in the wrong one." Very, very difficult for LGBTIQA plus people. So they're the sorts of reasons why my little crew, we're all determined to change this. So I've been in the role now for just over a year. And in that year, we have refreshed our strategic direction. So this is our vision. This is the reason we come to work. We want a society where everyone is seen, heard, safe and supported before, during and after disasters in a gender-informed way. That's why we do what we do. So we do that, as I say, through evidence-based research, through delivering training, developing resources, advising. I'm on a lot of advisory groups now that are new for our organisation, the National Women's Alliances. There's a United Nations diverse gender advisory group that I've been invited to join. National and international opportunities to influence policy, planning and practice. We weren't doing this before I got here, but I'm a huge collaborator. I always feel like I sound like I'm in the French Resistance when I say that. Collaborating is a very good thing. So we collaborate with all sorts. I'm happy to amplify the work of other organisations as well as expand what we can do ourselves. You can have all of these slides. So I should have said that at the outset. If anyone's madly writing down this, you can have all of these. So we have some guiding principles, and I won't read them all to you, but we are very focused. So I'm going to assume you can read them now. I'm very focused on making sure we reduce the harm that's caused by our understandings of gender, that we're genuine in how we collaborate, and that we promote leadership. This is a new area for us. I can probably say we're not actually funded to do the leadership bit. We're not funded to do the collaboration and advisory bit, but we're going to do it anyway because we believe it needs to be done. So there are our guiding principles. Now, this is a little bit potentially tedious, this bit. If you go to our website, the copy of our strategic plan is on the website. We have what we call 6 strategic pillars. If I start at the bottom, when I got here into this role, we had one primary funder and a small funder, or a smaller amount of funding. We now have 4. So part of what I'm here to do is strengthen the organisation to make sure we're not at risk of the economics. I want us to live live long and prosper. That sounds like a Star Trek line. So I'm doing a lot of work to strengthen our funding and to bring in money to support our research and to develop additional training. So the bottom pillar is all about how we operate. The top 5 pillars are about these areas of work. So we want to strengthen our own research, but in a new twist, I also want to link with others doing research and find ways to share their research so that we all benefit from a greater, clearer understanding about gender and how it operates in a disaster context. We do want to shift the system. So we want to join with other women's groups. And Carol, you've been fabulous. I'm so impressed with how you've engaged with so many women's groups across this nation. So we too are starting to now do that so that together we can change things. Our training is a 1-day training program. Go to the website if you want more information. And it's all about how practitioners can improve the services they deliver to communities through this gendered understanding. We've noticed, I shouldn't say it like that, I'm being a little bit sarcastic. We have noticed that no senior people come. So we are now developing a leadership version of this to try and get senior people to understand the impacts that gender has. So we're going to try and expand our training processes and our resources. We do partner, as I said, and we're trying to now explore how do we foster leadership in the emergency management world, in this disaster world. A lot of the organisations are led by men, and we'd like to shift that. A lot of the work that happens you probably know this, a lot of the work that happens in communities is led by women. Now, that's terrific, but a lot of that work is underpaid and undervalued systemically. And so we'd like to shift that. So I'm working in the previous job I had at the Institute. I met most of the commissioners for emergency services, most of whom are men. I'm now working with them to try and work out how we can encourage women to feel safe in that emergency response sector. So our key priorities in our focus for the next couple of years, and I won't read all of these either, so feel free to skim them, is I do want to strengthen our research program. Evidence is very valuable in influencing change. Particularly if we want policy change, we have to have the evidence to back up why I say, women are harmed because of their gender in a disaster context. So we also want to refresh. We are refreshing a lot of our work at the moment. So we're refreshing the National Gender and Emergency Management Guidelines, which we'd like to then promote. I'll show you a slide later on which talks about the key partners that we think can help us shift the system, and we're engaging them in the work to refresh our guidelines. I'll move if that's okay, knowing that you'll get these later, to the next slide. I'm so excited about our training program. The 1-day training, we're in the final stages of polishing a new version of it, which builds on the research and makes a much clearer set of statements about how gender and disaster interact. And we'll be launching it at a training program in February on the 24th in Geelong, and on the 25th in Melbourne. Now, Melbourne's already sold out and we have a waiting list. This is an exciting thing. I like waiting lists because we'll do another program in Melbourne as a result. We're coming to all states and territories. Perth, I'm not sure when we're going to get to, Carol, because you're so far away. But our model, I mentioned the trainers that work with us. We have trainers in every state and territory. So our plan is to make sure we deliver this training in every state and territory. We have trainers in some of the key regional centres because we don't want to be just an urban focused program. So stay tuned. Partner for Collective Impact is a big focus for the next year for us. We want to really work out who are the key partners that we need to join, lock hands with, lock arms with, to change the system and do good. And I'm delighted to be having so much of a connection with Zonta. There are a range of other partners we've identified, but we haven't yet developed our best way forward with all of the partners. The good news is that the more we talk with people, the more interest people are showing in wanting to partner with us, which is fantastic. I had a meeting yesterday with the CEO of the Red Cross, and I know other people in the Red Cross at all levels, but I hadn't actually connected with him before, and now we have. And he's very keen to partner with us on major projects, which is great. This leadership piece of work, I'm lobbying a couple of organisations who might be willing to fund the start of this work. I would very much like to work with women and LGBTIQA plus people in the emergency world to define what it is that they most want. So I don't want to do too much deciding for people. I'm not that kind of a person, but I want to engage with people in the sector to say, what do you need to have a greater voice? How can we help you get that? In addition to the fostering leadership, or as part of it, we've got a couple of projects that are just at the very early stages with Indigenous groups in Darwin and in Alice, trying to work out how can we bring the Indigenous voice of women into this work as well, particularly because I'm going to say they're high profile, but you've possibly never heard of them. But in my work, we heard of them very quickly. Some very poorly managed evacuation processes for Indigenous communities. Simple, I found it horrendous and I couldn't quite believe this had happened. Simple mistakes about, with the best of intentions, getting the kids out of the community early. So putting all the kids on one bus to get them out, and then putting all the mums on a bus an hour later, by which time they were hysterical, so frightened their children had been taken from the community without them. Simple things like that. So we really need to educate many organisations for how to engage on First Nations gender. Okay, so the pictures on the left are literally postcards. I have a box of these in my office at home. And we take them to conferences and things to start conversations. And on the right, another summary of the sorts of work that we do and what we have on our website. So we train our trainers really thoroughly. So no one delivers our training unless they've been through quite a thorough training program. And then we keep in touch with those people. Many of the other things that I've mentioned are repeated on that slide, so I won't read them again. We are focused strongly at the moment on evacuation and relief centres. We've been funded under what's called the DRF, the Disaster Ready Fund, to do some serious work in developing some guidelines for how to design, develop and then deliver safer evacuation through a gendered lens. So we're very happy to be doing that work. And then I thought you might like to know, I have to say it's an absolute pleasure for me. I have, up until this moment, the stunningly warm and friendly looking woman in the colourful scarf and the red hair is the chair of my board. Renee is an academic at Sydney University, and she and I make great sense to each other, which is a delight. I'm accustomed to working for male chairs, and, daughter of farmers, you kind of learn pretty quickly how to get on in a man's world, because most of the men back then were farmers and they had farmers' wives. That's why I keep saying I actually have two parents that were farmers. Mum wasn't a farmer's wife, she was a farmer. And she did all the books. But anyway, don't go there. So she's terrific. And these are the other members of our board. We have a lawyer. We have the brother of someone who died at the hands of their ex-partner. We have women's health and, we have financial whizzes. We have a nice mixture of people on the board. And I'm extremely fortunate to have them as my board. And then we have a concept called advisors. We even call them expert advisors, which is fun. And as you can see by looking at these people, these are all our current advisors, and our three primary funders are at the bottom, Minderoo and two elements of the Australian government. Our primary funder is the Australian government under the National Action Plan to Eliminate Violence against Women and Children. And our secondary funder from government's point of view is the DRF money, the disaster ready money. But these advisors, as you can see, I've got a couple of Indigenous men. I'm chasing an Indigenous woman down to see if we can just balance that out a bit. We've got a couple of academics. Liz Broderick has been breathtakingly strong and clear in her support of us, which is terrific. Andrew Colvin is the guy in the middle, above my two Indigenous advisors. And as the CEO of the Red Cross, he's joined us as an advisor just recently. Yeah, a couple of commissioners there from the emergency sector. So that's our advisor group. I'm growing them. There's about 6 more that they're in the process of deciding and doing some paperwork for me so that I can add them to the website. All this beautiful, vibrant colouring, I have to say, I had to breathe deeply to do this, cost money. So we have rebranded. It appeals to my sense of humour to say we've rebranded. We spent some money with a lovely not-for-profit, gender-focused designing company run by women. And we've gone all vibrant because what we need to do is get visible, get loud, get visible, get noticed. So the strategic plan is there. The webinar on the left, we're about to have our first webinar conversation with Professor Flood, and we're going to run some webinars to start engaging, as you know, start engaging with issues and encouraging the disaster sector to come along, but also the women's health sector to come along, and organisations in the women's alliances and interested in gender in general. And we're going to see how that goes. On the far right, we have a newsletter, which we didn't have before. We've only just sent out the first edition of our newsletter. If you happen to be interested in us, by all means, sign up for our newsletter on our website. It's called The Cool Change. I don't know about you, but growing up in the country, you just want that cool change at the end of hot weather. So we thought we'd tell everyone we think we're the cool change. And then that's one of my staff who's been out doing this evacuation centre, gathering information for that project about how we can help evacuation centres be friendly for all genders. And we're being received very well because it's a very practical improvement to make. So I thought I'd show you just another way of glimpsing what it is that we are currently doing. And I might stop sharing because I kind of want to see all of you now, if I can find a way to, there we go, and say I am wide open to anything really. Questions, comments, discussions, any reactions at all?
Mute myself. Thank you very, very much, Margaret, for sharing both your journey and personal story and outlining how gender and disaster are approaching this important work. Are there any questions in the chat? I'm looking at it and I can't see any. Does anyone have any questions?
I can see a hand up. Suzanne's got her hand up. I can see that.
Marvellous. Go, Suzanne.
Thanks, Margaret. That was fantastic to know all that. Are you aware of an organisation called Firefoxes, which was started in 2009 after the bushfires around Kinglake? And it was started by a woman called Kate Riddell, and then she went on to do work in Queensland and that with the floods. And it's basically about women's mental health. Just wondering if you know about that organisation.
Do you know? I do. I've actually sat, now I'm not sure whether it's in Kate's kitchen. There were 2 of them.
Yes.
I can't remember the other woman's name now, but I sat in their kitchen having a chat to them about it. It was fantastic. Are they still active?
I'm not I think they're running in some form. Kate stepped back.
Yeah, I might Google them. I hadn't thought about them for a while. So thank you. I'll see if I can still. There are a couple of other groups not dissimilar to them. So there's a group called Disaster Wise, which was set up by a number of women similar to Kate, who'd been through an event and couldn't find, couldn't find other people who'd been through the events. And so they've set up Disaster Wise, community women mostly, but not all, who've been through an event, and now they connect with each other So yeah, I think these sorts of networks and groups are so important. Um, One of the things that I learned when I did my research all that time ago was people said the people we really trust and want to talk with and be heard by are actually community people just like us. We don't really trust it when politicians turn up or bureaucrats turn up because they don't seem to understand what it's been like for us, but we trust each other. So I'm strongly supportive of Disaster Wise, and I hadn't thought of the Firefoxes for a while. Thank you. That's a good reminder.
Thank you, Suzanne. I see one other question in the chat from Vera. Are there any plans to have training online to reach us in WA?
Oh, excellent. Thanks, Vera. I should have said we offer our training online. So there are always online options. We've shortened the online options so that it's a little bit less time taken because it doesn't have all the, chatting and so on. So yes, there are online versions. I'm not sure, so I'm now going to try and prove that I'm ambidextrous and see if I can. So on the website, the Lessons in Disaster Training, if you click on the website and by all means reach out to me if this doesn't work for you and I'll help you after the session. But if you click on the Lessons in Disaster Training, you can actually see upcoming dates and it tells you how to book. 100%. We think online's really important. It's also important for people who are in rural or remote areas where it's quite hard to get to a big centre. So yes.
Lovely. Thank you, Margaret. Now, I do see one other question from Sue, but I think we may touch on this in our group. So Sue's asking, or she's saying many Zontians don't understand how climate disaster affects Australians. How can we advise clubs to start advocating for gender equality? Some simple steps, but I believe that will be one of the topics for our group breakout room. So perhaps we can go there next. So we're going to explore two questions. What stood out for you today in Margaret's presentation? How can we as individuals and in our clubs practically support, amplify and advocate for the work of Gender and Disaster Australia? Now, we're going to be asking each group to provide 3 things that stood out for them and 3 ideas to support Gender and Disaster Australia's work. So Carol's going to put us into breakout rooms for 10 minutes and then we're all going to come back together. Thank you, Carol.
Sue Lees, could you be the lead in one of the groups, please, in group 3? So we'll have Bernadine for group 1, we'll have Petra for group 2, and Sue for group 3 for reporting back. I'll put you into your rooms now. Enjoy.
Thanks, Carol.
Bernadine, over to you, Bernadine. What did your group talk about?
Sorry, I just realised I was on mute. On the first question, what stood out for you today? We had some interesting topics. The first one was that gender is such a significant issue. So that was something that really stood out. The evidence base to be able to be more effective. We need to have that evidence and understanding, and also to, collect that data, as Margaret pointed out. And I know from, speaking with politicians, if you're going to be advocating to them about climate, they want data. A lot of people don't understand what is happening in the rural areas. There's isolation as opposed to the, particularly from the urban dwellers. So they don't understand about the roads, being cut off, not being able to reach evacuation centres and things like that. Another point that was raised was, what do we do about it? So that was something that we, talked about. Well, what are we going to do about it? And it's about amplifying the message and reaching out into the rural areas. And the training, so that's basically the first group. So the other point that came out in the first group was rural as opposed to urban. When there's a disaster in a rural area, there's that community support, as Margaret pointed out with her father in the photo. But when you get into an urban society, there is not that community grouping anymore. It's lost. So it's something that we thought needed to be aware of. The second point, which was how can we as individuals and in our clubs practically support and amplify and advocate. The one that came out first was training online, and great idea, because this gets to the outlying areas for people who don't live within the cities but out in the rural areas or out in more remote areas even of WA, which allows them to be better informed. And it also then it opens that possibility of advocating for training by the Gender and Disaster Australia group, like to promote it. We even talked about perhaps if the sessions were short enough, not too long, that they could be shown in club meetings as a point of difference for a meeting. Another point was raised by one of the Zontans in a Sydney club who's been trying to find out from her local councils. She lives in a bushfire zone. How do we, like, she's trying to work on her disaster plan and educate her club about this as well, and is having trouble reaching through the local councils, the right person to talk to for a start, and then what the disaster plan should be. So the other thing is, when disasters happen, even in urban, sometimes the roads can be congested. How do you get out of these roads? How do you get out of the area and reach the evacuation centres? And the other thing is, where are the evacuation centres?
Okay, that's
Deborah,
good.
who lives in country Victoria, raises questions of issues with country counterparts. So creating a community and finding out if in areas where they've had disasters, reaching out and finding out what those experiences were and learning from those experiences, and seeing what could be done better next time, and even just having the discussion and learning from the individuals how they are, and create more of an awareness. Another idea that came through was run targeted social media campaigns off the facts on impacts on gender, on women, especially during disasters. Have some strong messaging, and perhaps run it for a period of time around Earth Day. And I know another point that came out was that in disaster-prone rural areas, there seems to be a lot of social media presence from places like the RFS, where they're educating the community and saying, have you got your disaster plan ready? We're coming into bushfire season, and, to receive advice and to be prepared. I've not seen that in our local area when there's been bushfires. If there is some advice, or maybe I'm not on the right pages. So that's something that came out as well as an urban dweller. And that's it from our group.
Thank you. Well, we go over to Mari now.
Mari, thank you, Mari.
G'day. We had a discussion. We talked about what stood out, and it was noted that initially that it was really good, as I mentioned, to hear about the LGBTQ community acknowledged and mentioned in this disaster area. We discussed Indigenous people needing tools and training, not necessarily waiting for people with hard hats, perhaps looking more towards people with lived experiences for support, and depending with, bringing with them also emotional intelligence to be able to deal with this and support those communities as best they can. It was brought to what stood out is what men go through as well. What supports are there for that? And to prevent this gender-based violence, as we've been talking about, which is increasing, and also how to increase a connection with these within our communities and within all these different communities as well. We talked about what can we do, how can we connect. It was mentioned that primarily a lot of women are working out on communities or in some of these roles, moving them towards leadership. Maybe a thing that could be, put forward. And response and afterwards, Zonta says no and now. Risk factors moving forward, high gender-based violence, more domestic violence, raising an awareness and understanding to this, that how these things are impacted and how the domestic violence is increased in these disasters and things like that, which There was some statistics that we discussed with a 1% rise to 2% in violence awareness. And how do we spread this? How do we spread this word? And, being part of training, being part of being active and spreading it out into communities and via people to create knowledge on the subject. I certainly would be very interested in the training. Yeah. So if that makes sense, was I probably a bit racy? But if anything else, I think we did.
Good work, Mara.
Yeah, I know. It's on the spot. Yeah, all good. Thank you.
Thanks for volunteering.
Yeah, thanks for the discussion. I am quite new. It's not an excuse, but I truly did not have with the disaster and all that sort of in that particular area. Obviously, it does have an impact, but you just don't realise. We might say 1% increase, but that's quite significant when you look at population per capita and things like that. Yeah.
I shared with the group your statistic that you've had in some of your slides in the past, Carol, that a 1% rise in ambient temperature leads to up to 2% rise in violence and the impact of...
Actually up to 7%.
Oh, well, there you go.
Wow.
Even worse. I was trying to think, was I remembering it correctly?
And there was a 10-degree increase or for each 10% increase or decrease in precipitation, either droughts or floods, related to a 1% increase in child marriage in affected countries. Because when the families lost everything, they sold their daughters. Yeah. So, Sue, over to you.
All right. So, like the other groups that we've crossed over, but fairly quickly. So we were, the domestic violence figures stood out. Again, we knew there was a relationship, but just how big there was an increase in domestic violence, we hadn't quite gripped. In terms of the toilets, Bev was saying that she has in fact worked with people with disabilities, and that is a huge area where people can be really embarrassed and feel terrible and not being able to sort of go to the toilet easily. And so that's actually quite an important area. And then there was also the comment that it was also good to see that we actually need a balance with male and female, not just assuming that we can treat everybody equally, but we need to actually work out people's gender and how it relates to their actual needs. And there was also a comment about the importance of actually working in the community with community people, because that was where the trust existed, and that really stood out to us as well. And then the second question about how we can help individually and as clubs. So the fact that people don't generally have a plan, maybe and Carol, you have advocated this yourself, that we go to clubs with something like the Red Cross plan and we say, look, we can look at this, we can even do some of it now, is still a really good idea. And then to advocate in our clubs to attend sessions like the Gender Australia training, to encourage women to look after them. I think this is something really important that came out today, encourage women to look after themselves so they can actually look after others in this situation, and to encourage women to be leaders in this situation, because they do have special needs and we need women out there leading. Also, educating ourselves so that we can pass on some of that knowledge and actually make people feel comfortable with doing something about educating themselves in this situation. Encouraging people to look at the information online. I mean, people look at information online all the time, but they like it short and sweet. So maybe we can, again, have some sort of impactful short video for a club event like other people have said. So that's us.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thanks for that, Sue. I actually had a conversation with Sandra Law. Sandra and I are both volunteers with emergency services with Red Cross. So we were having a little conversation about how things worked in that space, which was very illuminating, where we were sharing our knowledge. Anyway, so thank you to everyone for contributing to that discussion. I just want to do another shout out to the activities being done by Gender and Disaster Australia and the newsletter. Please sign up for it. They've got a Rising Tides event, I noticed, on what films reveal about resilience, gender and disaster coming up. So that looks interesting. There is the webinar, some research that's been done, and those are some of the lessons in disaster face-to-face events being held in March, February and March. But go on the website because I don't think you'll be disappointed.
Could I just say a couple of, I know you're short of time, Carol, so I'll be very brief. Thanks for the extra plug. I would just want to say a couple of things. I really recommend the Red Cross preparation tools. I think their advice is fantastic in this area. I have put in the chat 3 organisations. I know the people in each one of them extremely well. For some of you, you just might like to have a look at those 3 organisations that are doing this kind of awareness raising or training. I recommend, or networking even, I recommend all 3. And the last thing I wanted to say was we have all sorts of ambitious projects on the boil, and in the group I was very kindly welcomed into, someone mentioned videos. We are currently working with an animator to turn some of this concept into a short video about what's going on, what's the facts, what do I do about it. We're trying to create very action-oriented things. If you come to the training, there is an action planning component with lists of ideas of what can I do. Try some of these. So there's all sorts of ways of building on the ideas you've come up with. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for having me. Stay tuned. We will share. We're very much into sharing everything we develop in ways that hopefully will make it easily understood and digested and just be a conversation starter with you and with your clubs all over the country. So good on you for what you do, all of you. And yeah, thank you very much for having us.
And thank you, Margaret, for really bringing to light all the things that you're doing in Gender and Disaster Australia, because I think for many members, they did not realise the issue or the things that are being done around it. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. So get on that Gender and Disaster Australia website. Short message. Right, I'm going to tell you a few things that are going on. I want to push the virtual art gallery. We have a video about it, and it's just a couple of minutes, but it'll just tell you what it's about. Can you hear it? that gives you a feel for the art gallery. So get your submission in today. I also want to give you some advance notice that Zonta International will soon be launching the Step Forward for Equality campaign for Earth Day 2026. It'll use the symbol of the footprint as it symbolises the carbon footprint we leave on the planet and the process of understanding how climate justice takes steps and cannot be solved overnight. The campaign's designed to raise awareness, educate, showcase stories of climate action, and produce a statement on Earth Day endorsed by like-minded organisations. And there's 3 actions planned as well. Besides the statement, there'll be a step forward activity and an activity where you compare gender equality with climate justice. And information about this will go on the international website soon, so look out for it. When you're on the website, have a look at the latest internal training program on advocacy, and it's the Zonta Says Now one. It's 17 minutes, and it just goes through, I'll just go through it. Come on, let me see if I get, why is it going to go? Hello, everyone. It's just me, but it just goes through the train. It goes through our video of why we need gender equal climate action. And it shows the framework for action and why we have the think tanks, and it goes through all the various resources and the art gallery and asks you to take 3 steps. Read the statement, get on the international website to see the resources, and get your submission in the art gallery. So have a little look at that. Get rid of that one. Next thing is, in January, our intercontinental think tank featured Hui Young from C40 Cities. She leads them in Kuala Lumpur, and Krista Milne, the Chief Heat Officer from City of Melbourne. And the recording's available online. But what's interesting is that our international convention in Vancouver will be having our first Zonta Says Now walk. And we were asked to team up with a local organisation in Vancouver. And we found Women for Climate. And the organisation is a C40 Cities initiative and trains women to lead and mentor other women in climate justice. So we hope to do our Zonta Says Now workshop at convention with our new Women for Climate friends. In March, we have the NGO CSW 70 in New York, and the International Working Group will be delivering a Zonta Says Now online event, which will be 13th of March at 11:30 a.m. in Sydney time. The theme is Transform Climate Action, Women as Leaders and Decision Makers for Sustainable Change. Be aware that CSW, the NGO, has hundreds of online events, so please register today so you can see what's available. Hand over to Bernie to tell you what's happening in Australia.
Thanks, Carol. Our last update in January featured the Australian of the Year, Catherine Bennell-Pegg. While she may not have gone into space yet, when she does, she will be the first to wear the Australian flag. The 2 other astronauts flew with the Star-Spangled Banner from Australia. Congratulations, Catherine, for raising the profile of women in STEM. The update is on the website and includes information about the virtual art gallery, think tanks, and our climate awards. The next Australian update will be in March. There are 3 climate awards that we are now aware of in Australia. District 22 award deadline has been extended to the 30th of June. This award is valued at $10,000 but is only available to women in Queensland and the Northern Rivers area. District
possibly, Margaret, you have somebody from your organisation who might be good for that. Check it out. I'm sure there's heaps of women in your wonderful organisation doing stuff. Happy to hear from you. Sorry.
The District 23 award for 2025 went to Sally Quinn from Green Collect, and we hope to have her speak at a future meeting. We also heard about Zonta Club for Canberra Breakfast, who have had a Women and Climate Change Scholarship. This was used by Alma Kawambu from Papua New Guinea to attend the Australasian Aid Conference in Canberra. If your club has an award or an event, please share it. At our last meeting, we were very excited to share that we were collaborating with other women's organisations to host a Gender Day at Climate Action Week Sydney. Sadly, we have had to withdraw. This year, we've been trying to build our relationships with each other as well as with speakers and organisers. However, with CSW, Women Deliver, various organisational anniversaries and the pre-COP conference, it has stretched some of our partners too much. When we do the event at Climate Action Week Sydney, we want to do it well, and too many organisations were diverted with other priorities. The good news is that we are in a strong position for next year. We have designed the program and identified some of the speakers, so onwards and upwards. Some of you may have already booked for the Women Deliver conference in April in Melbourne. You can see that climate justice as a gender and age issue is one of the key themes. It looks like the day before the conference may be a special Climate Justice Day. Some of the speakers have been announced, and it looks like the event is going to be a cracker. There are former heads of state, Australian political leaders and United Nations leaders, and also the Minister for Women for Kiribati and the Pacific Islands. Keep an eye on the website for who else will be added. Two of our allies are currently conducting surveys. Sweltering Cities wants to know how you are faring in the summer heat. And 1 million women want to know how climate change is affecting you. Please take part in the surveys. Without data, advocacy is almost impossible. I'll hand back to Carol to bring us home.
Thanks, Bernie. I recently came across the latest Oxfam report called Resisting the Rule of the Rich. Did you know that there are 3,000 billionaires in the world today? It's hard to imagine the difference between a million and a billion. So think of it this way. If 1 second was $1, it would take about 11 days to reach $1 million, but 31 years to reach $1 billion. Billionaires' fortunes are growing rapidly. They're 4,000 times more likely to hold a political office, yet only 13% are women. And just 12 billionaires now hold more wealth than 4 billion people combined. At the same time, the richest 10% of people produce around half of global greenhouse gas emissions, while those with the smallest carbon footprints are experiencing the harshest climate impacts. So we see a clear pattern. Those with the least responsibility for climate change often have the least power in climate decisions. Interestingly, Forbes recently listed the top 50 billionaires in the world and in Australia. Interestingly, if every dollar is a second, Elon Musk's wealth is equivalent to over 27,000 years, and Gina Reinhardt to over 792 years. No wonder governments around the world are looking at ways to redistribute wealth. Is there any other news that anyone else wants to share quickly? If not, I've just got a little piece I just wanted to mention. You may have noticed that the current government has approved its 35th fossil fuel project this week, an expansion and extension of the Queensland Middlemount coal mine with 5.2 million tonnes a year until 2053. I've got a 1-minute video to finish off with, which I'll go back to and just press the right part. Listen to this.
In a way, fossil fuels are a drug that the world became hooked on and is now in rehab. Australia is the world's third largest fossil fuel exporter, and the Albanese government has approved 32 new coal and gas projects since being elected in 2022, presumably shooting for number one. Australia, in short, is the ultimate Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde when it comes to climate change. Although we don't switch by drinking a potion, we're good and bad at the same time. And we are pretty good. Apart from saying the right things and legislating ambitious emissions targets, our own electricity system is now 42% renewable on average. And the other day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it was 65%. And coal generation is expected to be zero in 13 years. But our exports simply blow that record away. Coal exports are starting to decline because it's more expensive now than renewables, but they're still very large. Gas is still rising. And with all the approvals for new projects, it's only going to keep rising. And of course, the argument is that if we don't supply the coal and gas, someone else will. That's a bit like a drug dealer saying that if he doesn't supply the cocaine, someone else will. And in a way, fossil fuels are a drug that the world became hooked on and is now in rehab.
Well, I've never seen it put so succinctly. And in 1 minute, I thought that was amazing. So
Good summary.
I just can make note of that. And so finally, just want to double check there's nothing in the chat line. We've got some links in the chat line for things here. So that's great. Okay, good. Okay. So our next meeting, got some good news, will be on Saturday, the 11th of April. Our guest speaker will be Sally Quinn, the founder and CEO of Green Collect and winner of the 2025 District 23 Women Taking Climate Action Award. Sally combines circularity with social justice in her enterprise, showing how donut economics can work in practice. So that'll be interesting for those who are going to get introduced to donut economics. So please register today. And many, many thanks again to Margaret, my fellow co-presenters, Bernadine, Petra and Sue, and all of you for making today's meeting so interesting. Margaret opened our eyes to links between gender stereotypes and how they can impact your safety in a disaster. There is so much that we can do to raise awareness. Every conversation helps. Before we go, I'll just take this screen off share so we can just give each other a wave. And until next time, keep breathing, keep smiling, and have fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Great.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Carol.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.